Many thanks for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. Now, just before we bring in our guests for the second part of our conversation on rising cost of house rent, let's take these excerpts by Oyeyemi Ajayi.
There's a factor for greed, 100% I agree with you. Then there's also a place where somebody has built a house and it tells you that this house, forgive me to speak in Yoruba, Molo school, meaning I bought this property because that's what I will use to send my children to school. Everybody has different investment objectives when they are buying real estate, for example, right? So maybe school fees, for example. So there are different factors, like I said, we can't exhaust it here. School fees is now 2 million and the landlord looks at it, how will I pay these school fees if I don't increase this rent?
The government just needs to commit to providing housing. That's just the key.
All right. For me, I think we need to amend some of our laws. The government is good at copying laws from abroad. In America, for example, if you know any abandoned, in some states, if you know any abandoned house, you are allowed to go in and take possession and live in that house.
So
yes, we need to copy those ones.
Right.
And we need to make some drastic changes in our laws.
Part of it is the commercial banks need to lower their interest rate and make funds, both Federal Mortgage Bank and all the developers, to make funds available for them to build more affordable housing estates.
All right.
That's the word.
All right.
Regulate the activities of agents. Regulate the activities of real estate developers all over the world. When they put their signboard, they put their name, they put their number. So when they commit a crime, you use the number to track them. We are not having that. The time has come. Number two, increase the salaries of workers. Inflation has affected them, and it is time to act. When you get to Ghana, you see the salary somebody's collecting in Nigeria. When you convert it to cedis, we discover it is nothing. So it is better to work in Ghana and be sending you the money home. Nigerians, please go and join cooperative. You can use cooperative to help yourself to own a house. Go to housing microfinance that can help you. The mortgage system is not working as it should be because the interest rate is high.
All right.
Government must address it.
All right. You had all the solutions, canvassed by our guests during our conversation, the first part of our conversation on house rent. We have guests joining us here in the studio for the second part of our conversation. Let me welcome Damola Akindolire, who is the lead consultant, Renewed Hope Cities Program. Good to have you with us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We also have joining us from our Kaduna studio, Shehu Usman Salihu, who is the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Kaduna. Thank you, PS, for joining us for this conversation.
He is the Chief Press Secretary to Kano State Governor. Thank you very much for joining us. We have been joined via Zoom from Lagos by Olukayode Olusoya, who is the CEO, the Oak Holdings. Good to have you back with us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, gentlemen, thank you very much once again. And particularly, Kade, thank you for coming back because I'm keen enough with, the statement you made during our earlier conversation, but I'm not directing this question to you. So just rest a while and listen to, the views of our other guests this morning. I'd like to go to Kaduna, where we have the PS, talk to us about affordability, because Olukayode said in the first part of our conversation that he didn't believe in affordability housing. Rather, he would opt for mass housing project. And I'm just wondering, as a matter of policy for Kaduna, is it affordability or delivery?
It's a combination of the two. Whatever government tries to do and trying to provide accessible and affordable housing to the citizens, it has to be in such a way that the social needs of the citizens will be accommodated. And in so doing, I want to sincerely believe it's a combination of both the affordability and accessibility. And in Kaduna State, as a government, we have it as one of the major cardinal agenda of His Excellency, the Executive Governor of the state, to make sure that housing is provided as much as possible to the citizens. And we are looking at it beyond meeting the social needs of the people. Housing is an important component of the social and economic life of the people, that if you address that aspect, it has a multiplier effect of not just attending to the social needs, but even rejigging the economy. And when we came in, we realized that that gap exists. Recently, the Federal Minister of Housing and Urban Development updated the national housing deficit, which indicated the national average, and as well as what applies to subnationals, including Kaduna. But even before that, as a government, we have a very effective institution at the domestic level that gives us empirical evidences. So when we first came, we discovered that there is this deficit. And the best way to address this deficit is to have a kind of combined efforts where the government will take the lead in providing the legal and policy framework to drive the process, then engage primarily developers. Because gone are the days when the government will take charge of almost everything. The funding requirement is massive. The process is, in most cases, being driven by the government is a bit sluggish. But when we have a combination of both the government and private developers, we tend to get more result. And this has been the focus from Kaduna State, and it is yielding good result. As I'm speaking with you, the governor has graciously approved a system where, in addition to what the ministry and other agencies under the ministry are doing, we have an assemblage of developers, both domestic and international, that have been given vast tract of land, more than 3,000 hectares across the state, largely within the urban centers, where some of these developers will mobilize resources, develop this in such a manner that the process will be accelerated and the citizens will have access. Now, the equity of the government normally comes in the land being donated to the developers, and we mostly follow it up by providing on-the-site infrastructure, so that at the end of the day, when the housing units are completed, be it the social housing being driven by the government or the mass housing being developed by the developers, you will see a massive discount, a price differential between what the government anchored program and the one purely driven and coordinated by the developers without the input of the government. So in so doing, we have a system where the unit prices, off-taking prices, is in most cases discounted within the range of 30 to 40% than the other. So in so doing, the citizens of Kaduna State are being made to have access to some of these important aspects of their
Beautiful PAMSEC, thank you. I just wanted us to have an idea of what is happening, the policy thrust in terms of housing from Kaduna. But let's also bring in the CPS to the Kano State Governor. And we know that Kano has one of, one of the largest, in terms of population, urban, development in the country. I'm just wondering what your policy thrust is in terms of housing. Is it a social obligation, or are you also compelled by market forces?
Housing is one of the cardinal objectives of the Governor Alhaji Abubakar Yusuf. Even in his own blueprint before the elections, during the election campaigns, he made it clear that the Kano State government, if elected as a governor of Kano State, he's going to give priority to housing, because he realized that there have been massive deficit of houses because of the population explosion in Kano. So the governor is really concerned about that. That is why when he came in 2025, he created the Ministry of Housing Development in February, if I could remember vividly. That is to show that how concerned he is with the issue of housing scheme. And then the issue of affordability is very key. The governor felt that, yes, it's very important to construct houses that are affordable for people to own houses, and then he encourages private-public partnership in such a way that investors will come in to build more houses for people in a very way that people will own a house. Thank God that there are a lot of people that come in and show interest in developing, this sector. And then the government, it's in its own drive, started a massive construction of houses, talking about 50 houses at each local government of 36 local government outside the metropolitan. So this is an effort by the governor to show that housing is very important. Shelter is very important to everybody. Looking at the fact that Kano State is the most populous state in Nigeria, according to 2006 census, and now we are talking about 20 million people are residing in people, or more than that. So it's very, very important for the government to do that. That's what the government has been doing. And if you look at the budget of this year, 2026, the budget itself was that infrastructure, the budget of infrastructure, talking about massive infrastructure development, which housing scheme is one of them. You're talking about 25% of the total budget of 1.4 trillion naira, which is about over 300 billion is going to be injected into infrastructural development. This shows you that the governor is really concerned about the deficits of housing in Kano State, and more will come in to look inward and see how the Kano people will be owning a house at the very affordable prices.
Very much, Mustafa Mohammed, for your contribution so far. Let me quickly get to Lagos, where we have Olukayode Olusoya, who is joining us for the second time. Now, last time out, a lot of you said government needs to come in with the big funds to ensure that housing becomes what it should be. But of course, where there are competing needs for a government, can government alone develop the housing sector to the point where the average Nigerian low-income earners can also own homes and be freed from the clutches of their landlords? Or if that particularly is not the only thing that government wants to achieve, how can we make this work from where you stand?
All right. Thank you, and good morning again, everyone. I'll just take off from where we stopped the last time. And if you remember, one of the things that I said, government is the richest, forgive my language, bank they could ever be in any country, as is the norm. And government is also the biggest landowner, as it is in every environment. Now, to be realistic with you, I'll tell you for a fact that the factors of production of houses is not cheap. I still maintain my stand, right? So you can't say there is affordable housing when the people's earning capabilities cannot match up with the inputs of building a house, right? So there has to be a subsidy, which is what I said last time, and I'm still maintaining. And I'm glad Kano State government, and I think Kaduna said, is something that they are implementing already, and that's what's happening in Lagos. right? So, because whether you like it or not, the cost of building a house in Kano is, apart from, of course, aside the structural elements, maybe piling and all that is different in Lagos, but all the inputs, cost of production in Kano is the same as in Lagos, and is probably the same as you have in Ogun State, as same as you have in Port Harcourt. Why? Because the price of cement will probably hover around the same price point. Price of sand, price of all the inputs, iron rods, they're going to cost about the same, right? So if to build a room and parlor, for example, will cost you about, basic cost, iron rods and all that, 7.5 million, 10 million, just saying, for example, at the minimum wage, even at 75,000 net of everything, it will take such a person, because if you take out 30% of that factor of how much a person has earned for a month, and you average that over a year, even that person will not be able to meet up with payments for that, because of course the person has to pay several things that match up to what everybody pays every month. So what am I saying? For you to be able to reasonably build more houses, for a fact, I believe that we should do more public-private partnerships, because the deficit is so huge that we need a lot of players in that field for them to be able to meet up. That's number one. Then number two, there has to be some kind of incentives, meaning there should be some subsidized factors, subsidized cement, land contribution to the schemes, and the likes of it, for it to be able to be a successful scheme, right? Now, that program in itself is not something that, of course, because Nigerian being what it is, it has to be controlled. Otherwise, you just see our madam and our anchor and the host will become developers overnight if they have access to the people that can make it happen. Of course, all those factors will be controlled. But my point is, you can't have affordable housing if government or even one of the big players, maybe Aliko Dangote will say, okay, I'm providing cement, 10 million bags of cement for free to Niger State for them to be able to develop. There has to be some kind of subsidy, because at this price point, trust me, it's not for the faint-hearted.
Thank you very much. I'll get back to you, because there are a lot of questions that you'll probably need to answer. But back here in the studio, let me get to Damola Akindolire. What problem exactly is the Renewed Hope, cities program trying to solve?
Okay, thank you very much again. I think the topic is down to rents. And this is the first time we're seeing any government taking out what I'll call similar to a state of emergency approach to dealing with the housing deficit. So what we've done is we've carved out a multidimensional program, starting with the Renewed Hope Cities. So the idea behind the Renewed Hope Cities is that we are building new cities within 5 to 30 minutes proximity from existing city centers. We must understand what is the issue. The issue is, as at 1979, 1 in 5 people used to live in urban centers. As at 2024, 3 in 5 people now live in urban centers. So we've tripled that. 15 million people used to live in urban centers around the country. Now we have 110 million living in urban centers, times 8 the number. So that would definitely stretch the infrastructure, stretch the housing needs, and stretch every other thing. And that's why the government of the past used to have things like satellite cities, used to have things like new communities. You need to ask, when last did we open a new district in Abuja, for example? So that's what the Renewed Hope Cities is trying to address. And that's why you have it at February, sometime in 2023, where Mr. President did the ground foundation laying at Kasana for the Renewed Hope Cities program in Abuja, which is now poised to deliver 5,000 housing units, which is just 5-10 minutes away from the current Gwarinpa district. Now, with that, people now have added options to say, okay, rather than pay 6 million or 8 million in Gwarinpa or somewhere closer, I can take 4 million in Kasana, and then we open up the next district like that. So it's a multi-dimensional approach to how we can continue to use planning to solve housing challenges. Then you have the Renewed Hope Housing Estates, which is, and by the way, the Renewed Hope Cities is funded by private sector, and it's attracted over 100 billion, in private sector capital till
Completely
date.
by the private sector.
Completely. So we have one going on in Kano, where 1,005 is being delivered. We have in Lagos, where 2,000 units is being built. And we also have in Katsina, where we currently have about 4,000 under construction.
Can I ask you a question? Sorry, I'm sorry to interject.
Please, go ahead.
Yes, because he asked you, Victor asked you, how the renewed Hope Cities program.
Addressing this
Yes, addressing. Now, our guest in Lagos said something that government alone cannot, address the deficit. And during our conversation here, we actually corrected that the correct deficit is 14.9.
About 15 million.
About 15 million, not 20. Whether it's 14, 15, 20,
anything in millions.
It's still huge. Yes, it's still huge. So there's a structural gap. So the question is, how do developers like you, or the private sector like Renewed Hope Cities program, address this structural gap?
Okay, so that's what I was trying to explain.
Yes.
The reality is the cost of construction and the cost of finance makes it almost impossible to deliver anything affordable. That's the truth. The cost of finance average today is somewhere between 30 and 35%. The cost of construction has tripled since 2023 due to inflationary impact. And that's why I said the government of today has a multidimensional approach. For example, to address this issue you've just raised, which is the cost of construction, they are setting up manufacturing hubs in the 6 geopolitical zones. Imagine a country where 60% of your building items are imported, and the only thing we have here, we don't have any steel rolling mill here. We don't have any, the limited tile manufacturing companies are limited. So until we begin to bring those items home, and manufacture them locally, I don't think we'll be seeing anything around affordability anytime soon. However, the Renewed Hope Cities is designed to bring down the cost of rent, because the real issue here is supply. The more you have supply, the more you can administer the issue of rent. You also have the Renewed Hope housing, the Renewed Hope housing, which is the government building 500 units in each of the 36 states of the Federation. 14 of those estates are already ongoing as we speak, and they would come to fruition. And I'm sure in the next budget, we have another 18 or so that will be going live to take it up to about 30.
We hear these numbers. I don't know.
Yes.
Victor, we hear these numbers. Who lives in them?
Okay,
Who is accessing these houses? Because look at in Lagos, for instance, the people of Makoko, for instance, their concern now is not just the demolition.
Of course.
It is, the fear of getting decent, affordable accommodation.
That's correct, madam. The reality is that not everybody will own homes today. We have to ask ourselves, what is the rental supply in the market? The rents we have in the market, the rent units we have in the market are private landlords that will build 2 flats, 4 flats. That can address the growth of 210 million people. It's impossible. So until we begin to see institutional capital, funding rental housing, we're not going to have the kind of situation that we hope or dreamed of. However, back to Renewed Hope again. What is Renewed Hope Social Housing going to do to address this issue? The social housing is a program that hopes to achieve 100 units per local government. Okay? These are the things that can bring down or impact rent or development.
Yes, when supply
is at least not even maybe matching up, but at least trying to impact the deficits in a way and manner that can apply. And there's a portal, and that's where transparency comes in. The government of today has set up a portal under the leadership of Architect Ahmed Langua, where almost 80,000 applications have gone in for people that need access to homes. So this mentality of everybody must own homes. Okay, someone in Makoko now whose house has been destroyed, which mortgage do you want to give to that person can pay to go and own a home? The real issue is how do we get institutional capital to get into the rental industry and help Nigerians pay with the means that they have to live in those places in a decent way.
Which category of Nigerians? And I always speak from the civil servants' perspective because that's my constituency. Mm-hmm. You talk about the people in Makoko, talk about civil servants, the average civil servant.
Correct.
Who has a secure job, who works for government.
Correct.
Whether state, whether federal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you see the irony. if you've said not everybody can own, can even a civil servant, given all that there is, own one? If you say it is renewed hope,
Yes.
the question is whose hope?
Okay, so civil servants definitely, case in point, the renewed hope in Lagos, the average cost of houses in that area will probably go for somewhere around 50 million. Those units were sold in the market.
Payable for how long?
Payable for as long as 30 years, depending on your age to retirement. The estates were sold for between 35 and 38 million naira. That's well over 25% discount compared to the available market pricing. But because Nigerians are not looking at the opportunities, we're looking at the situation. A civil servant can definitely afford that. And the FMBN is there to provide you with the support you need. Mortgages at 6%. The government has put 250 billion to a single-digit MRIF at 9.75. But until you get into that program, we will continue to speak about the issues like the issues are not surmountable. But we have to start somewhere, which is where we are today. You know, this is the holistic plan that this government has put in place, and I think that's the way to go. Once you continue to, the Renewed Hope Cities is a PPP program driven solely by private sector. Blended finance is taking shape there, where they're able to take finance from both development finance institutions and commercial institutions, blend them to bring down the cost of finance. And that's how we're able to deliver houses that are 20%, 25% more affordable. And then more importantly, there's something called cross-subsidy, you know, that is being applied in the renewal program, which is the higher value units in those locations take more share of the infrastructure costs than the low value units. So you won't see any renewal program where the cost of the apartments exceed 50 million naira, which is the threshold allowed by the Federal Mortgage Bank to finance.
What size of apartment now? 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom?
2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, maximum.
50 million.
You would not see anyone exceeding that threshold. They start at 25. Or I just mentioned in Lagos. Imagine having an apartment in Lagos for 35, 32 million naira. Almost impossible.
Where in Lagos?
Right bang on the Coastal City. On the coastal road, that will take you 30 minutes to get to VI. So once infrastructure is aligned with housing development, we will continue to see rental rates follow through, and housing would also follow suit. And these are practical. These are not things we're saying just on the internet. People can go there, like they say, go and verify. You know, so we need to address the elephant in the room, which is, would everybody own a home today? I don't think that's the situation.
Wow. All right, let's again go to Kaduna, and I'm just wondering, again, mass housing. You know, over the years, we've heard, you know, a number of housing schemes, both initiated by federal, state government, and all that. Now, if that was feasible, why are we still having, you know, house rents, you know, skyrocket?
I sincerely believe one of the reasons that led to the current scenario where, despite previous efforts, we still have issues of very high cost of rentage is simply because those mass housing projects were more or less politically driven, not based on needs assessment. When a government, for whatever reason, is desirous of providing accessible housing to the citizens, it should be based on scientific and factual evidences. Is in our view as a state, not the best way to go to just sum up and say each local government must have this number of housing units, because the viability of such may not justify the investment. So when in the past, most governments, I don't want to mention the states, where you have this kind of generalized template of constructing this housing, in most cases, you see some of these housing estates being abundant or underutilized. And it tells you why we need to adopt a better and more result-oriented strategy. And that's exactly what Kaduna State government is doing now. The hectares I just mentioned a moment ago were largely allocated to private developers that have conducted very good research, especially within the municipal local governments, where the real challenge of housing deficit exists. I'm not discounting the fact that even in some other local governments of urban areas and local government headquarters and other settlements do not have housing deficit and rentage issues. No, we are looking at it in form of, on the scale of priority. The suburban and urban centers needed to be addressed first. So to answer your question, we are trying to avoid the mistakes of the past by concentrating more within the urban and suburban areas. The government is doing that, and as I've said, both the social housing and the mass housing by the developers are now being targeted to address that. Later today, God's willing, His Excellency will conduct the, or rather perform the groundbreaking ceremony of a city, a smart city within the Abuja, Kaduna, Buhari area, because the target is to address the corridor of Kaduna, Abuja residents, such that that current challenge being experienced by people in FCT in particular will be substantially addressed by the time you have a lot of housing estate within, outside the Abuja city center, especially the suburb and other areas. As long as there will be accessibility, people will not mind staying somewhere. In fact, in the long run, our target as a government is to create a scenario where people in Abuja can conveniently leave their families in Kaduna and be going to Abuja and do their work on a daily basis and coming back, especially when the transport system, particularly the the rail system, is effective. That way, when you have a preponderance of estates, it's a simple function of demand and supply. When you have many housing estates that people can access within a reasonable arrangement, with little and difficulty, is natural. The rentage, and just like the renewed hope man said, is practically impossible. Let us be realistic. It's not a realistic agenda to believe that every citizen of Nigeria will own home. Our focus is to create massive housing facilities such that if you are lucky to have one to yourself, yes, to God be the glory. But if you don't have, you should not be subjected to avoidable trauma simply because you needed to acquire a house under a rented arrangement. So we are doing that, and it's showing the promising signs that we are on course.
Sorry, let me just go to Kanu. I'd like Kanu to also, weigh in on this matter, because if you look at, across the country, mass housing, even here in Abuja, in 2012 there was a national housing policy which targeted 1 million housing for Nigerians. Even during the time of the MDGs, we also know there were, so many initiatives. And you heard the PS in Kaduna talk about the initiatives of the state government. And I'm wondering, is it that some of these policies are too ambitious, for the capacity of the institutions that are implementing it? Or is it just a matter of lack of political will to do what is needed? As Oluka Ade in Lagos, had earlier, told us that this is not just, government must do something. Government and the private sector must join hands.
It's true that government has to do more on this issue of housing scheme, but let me paint a picture on the population of Kano and how the population explosion, added more to the deficits of houses in Kano. Kano is a business center and attracts a lot of people from different parts of the country. I can say Kano is just like mini Nigeria because it accommodates a lot of tribes, in Kano. And also during the high peak of Boko Haram insurgency, that's 2011, 12, 13, Boko Haram sacked lots of people from their own communities and villages. And some of them, relocated to Kano, and they found that there were opportunities there, businesses. And still now some of them are here, enjoying that business opportunities and then adding more population to Kano. What I'm trying to say is that the massive explosion has really been at high on the issue of housing scheme. Of course, the federal government had done the best that they could, but now the present government, I told you earlier on that the governor created the Ministry of Housing Development, which was not there before. Housing corporations are largely in Kano and agencies and the processor, but this effort of the governor creating the ministry, it gives it a mandate, it gives a vision, a mission, and also have a say in the executive council meeting. So it has to go a long way with that, and also encouraging the public-private partnership, because like what Kayode said, honestly, government could not provide houses for everyone. Not only in Kano, even the states that were not densely populated like Kano, they could not provide houses for each and every person. But together with the private sector, I believe more things will come a long way in such a way that more people will own a house. So that is what the government is doing in Kano State. And like I said earlier on, that the budget of this year is more of infrastructure. So we'll see massive infrastructural development, which housing is one of them. Talking about over 300 billion naira is to be injected into infrastructure development. So I believe with enabling environment that the Kano government has been putting in place, inviting more investors to come in, I'm glad to say that there are lots of developers now in Kano that are coming up with these, estates in different locations, and not only within the metropolitan city, but also within the local government areas. We have been seeing this, and the government, like I said earlier on, that started the constructions of 50 houses across all the 36 local governments, which were not within the urban centers. So with this kind of thing, I believe more and more people will be owning a house.
Thank you. Let me get back to Olukayode in Lagos. Now, you have said that you don't believe in affordable housing because it doesn't exist, right? My brother here, who is championing the Renewed Hope program, says everybody cannot own a home. At the same time, of course, if you can't own a home, but everybody has to live somewhere. So if you can't own a home, you have to rely on rent. And then you rely on rent. Even you, Kyle, they said that when the landlord looks at school fees, it's 2 million, or he looks at his bills and that, he heaps it on the tenant. This tenant does not earn what you expect him to pay. Do you then see a correlation between crime, for instance, and the pressure on the average Nigerian who cannot even leave the country, has to stay here?
All right. So something that is quite, so there was something I mentioned the last time, and the role of satellite towns are very important. So I'll use Abuja as an example. Not everybody will live in Asokoro, right? And I also use myself as an example the last time. I worked in a bank, Sky Bank at the time, and I lived in a place called Amuodofin in Lagos. And most of my colleagues, of course, they lived in Lekki Phase 1 because it was closer to Victoria Island, right? So I said we also need to manage what's Damola said. Damola, hello, by the way. I know that Damola. So something we need to be able to also manage is the fact that not everybody needs to live. Again, sorry, I'm going there. We walk by faith and not by sight. Let us be able to manage our pockets according to our income. Why do you want to live in Asokoro when your pocket is saying Guagalada or the satellite towns closer to the airport and the likes of it, right? You know, we need to have a national orientation. We need to also talk to ourselves. Is this kind of things that leads to crime? Why do you want to, your salary is 3 million per annum and you want to rent a house of 10 million per annum? Because you have faith that 2026 is going to be better than 2025, right? So instead of you to manage your expectations with the realities on ground, and trust me, when it comes to faith, I do a lot of faith crazy things, but again, you need to manage your risk with your realities, so to say, right? So it's important. Now, what he said is the hard fact. But at the end of the day, we also need to find a mix, I don't want to use a portfolio mix that matches our reality. So my pockets could afford me Amu Odofin conveniently when I was a banker, right? So I didn't bother looking at what others were doing, you know, riding SUVs, living in Lekki Phase 1. It was not something I was using an Honda Civic at the time. And I just, from Honda, I would go to Amu Odofin, they would insult me. Big boy like you, driving to, they used to call me living in the bush or something. But when I could afford it, I gradually moved to wherever it is that I'm staying now. So it's something that it doesn't happen overnight. So we need to also be able to manage our people and manage some conversations. Otherwise, you see that because aspire to perspire, respire to perspire, all those kind of conversations, people just keep getting into trouble, right? So that's the first area I'm going to address. Let us be realistic with some of these things. Now, that said, I'll come again to the two things. Supply, we need to increase the supply of housing, and we need to also throw in more infrastructure. Now, I've said the very first one, but these two need to go hand in hand. I will use Ogun State as an example for obvious reasons. Now, the then governor of Ogun State, Ibukunle Amosun, he was doing a lot of infrastructure projects that a lot of people thought, forgive my French, that this man must be a madman. He would do 10 lane projects, going to some communities, and everybody was wondering, why are you building a road going into nowhere? But guess what? What happened was, because of provision of infrastructure to some of those areas, developments, of course, will follow after infrastructure. So what you will find is that housing, provision of housing and supply increased. And with the increase in supply, what happened is that there was less demand in the urban areas, right? Because a lot of people could live far off and get to their destination in good time, which is what you say about New York and New Jersey, right? New York, a lot of people can work in New York. They live in New Jersey and they can commute to New York in very short time.
We have none.
The same happens to Ogun State and Lagos State right now. People live in some of those towns. That's why I said satellite towns concepts, actually, like Damola also mentioned, needs to be looked at. So when the infrastructure is right, the reason why Lagos-Ibadan Express might not still be a perfect example right now is that, trust me, if I have to go to Lagos-Ibadan Express, you know, you need to fast and pray that there's no truck that will break down or something going wrong on that road and all that. So infrastructure is very key. Lagos is running a fantastic template. I mentioned it last time. You know, you can come from Ajangbadi, Okokomaiko, and all those. There's provision of infrastructure. You can get to any point. So not everybody has to live in Ikoyi. Not everybody has to live in Victoria Island. So long as you can make it down to work in good time, there are BRT lanes, dedicated bus lanes like you have in London and other parts of the world, and you get to your destination in good time. So again, not everybody needs to live in the affluent areas. Live where your pockets can manage, right? And from there, you commit to work. Because guess what? Even the commute, when I was living in Namoda, I was living in a very big house, you know, big land. How much is land in these areas, right? Big house. But by the time you move to the price of your entire house in Namoda, might be the cost of a square meter in Ikoyi. Do you understand? So a lot of people even enjoy better quality of life and living in those satellite towns and the likes of it. So once we're able to provide infrastructure and we're able to provide some incentives for there to be supply, once the supply increases, trust me, house of price, landlords cannot live in all the houses they build.
Olukayode, I think we are speaking from two different realities.
Yeah, exactly.
Now,
Okay.
I give you an instance. As a banker,
Okay.
you
Yes.
could afford a house or to pay rent in Amuwodofi, right?
Yes.
Amuwodofi. As a banker. Now, as a banker, there are too many Nigerians that are below you, beneath you. Where do you expect them to live? If you lived in Amuwodofi, I give you another instance. Today, you feel that this is what your pocket can afford. You get an apartment. Many Nigerians, let's say in Abuja, live in Suleja, in Niger State. Many live, in other states, in Nasarawa State. At the moment, then you think this is what my pocket can afford. And then you pay it 6 months into that rent. You get notice of increment by 100%. By 100%, you get increase. So where do you live? If you were already living in Suleja, you need to walk. Most offices are in the city center. You need to walk in the city center. How long will it take you to get here every day? At what cost? Because the transportation system isn't just there. This is the reality. That's what I'm asking. I don't know where you are speaking from.
Okay, so what you have done, you have isolated one of the points I mentioned away from the others, right? And this is what I was saying. You have spoken well about the very first point about the management. But remember, I also talked about supply. And I also talked about infrastructure, which is something you mentioned about transportation. The concluding part of my conversation earlier is this. In a place where you have supply, there is adequate supply of a particular product. See, supply and demand gap, they always go in opposite direction, right? When there is supply and, the price points come down, economics, right? So if you have a good supply, let me not use the word huge supply, considerate supply vis-a-vis the demand, landlords will not wake up and increase their price points by 100%. It will not happen. Otherwise, you would have locked up houses where it does not even benefit the owner for them to do that. So the supply has to be there, the infrastructure has to be there for there to be competing price points in the demand for housing. That's what I said, right? So if you are living in Suleja and there's adequate supply of housing around there, you have options. You can move from that house, call the bluff of the landlord, and move to another house. Because that's not the only house you probably can get. There are more newer houses. There's more supply of houses. Do you understand? So it's not, you can't isolate the only part that I said that you have to leave. No. Otherwise, I agree with you. People will live on the streets. And so long as there's constricted supply of housing, of course, demand and supply, the landlords will always control the narrative. But in a case where you have lots of supply, so when there's a supply glut, for example, in a Victoria Island, guess what? You can't increase your pricing because once your pricing is abnormal, the next person takes on the profits. I don't know if I was able to throw more light on that.
Kayode, we'll come back to Damola, but just quickly. You talk about Suleja moving from one house to the other. Let's be realistic, honestly. We agree. Okay. We agree. Demand for housing is more than supply. That's on one side. Let's look at this. The ones available and the rent increment, which is what Victor talked about. So there's this belief that really there's a tacit collision among landlords and between landlords and developers to always, fix house rents. That's one. And then two, there's also the belief about, rent sometimes being driven basically by speculative behavior rather than by actual cost, because you talked about cost push issues. So how true is it that rent is basically determined by speculative behavior and not by the actual cost of construction cost?
Madam, you've thrown into economics. I've heard cost push, to be honest with you, there's no true science that guides these conversations in Nigeria to the best of my knowledge. And yes, you might be right. I think most of these price points are driven by speculative behavior. So again, to agree and buttress your point, you find out that price of land in, sorry to use this example, in Banana Island, for example, today is probably 4.5 million per square meter. Guess what? This time last year, it probably was maybe 2.5 or 3 million. I don't know what part of what I'm living in, but maybe 3 million per square meter. So the question I would ask to buttress your point is this: what has changed in that area between last year and this year? It's speculative, right? Somebody wakes up and feels, hey, this is what I believe I should be able to command from this area, and everything rises up to it. So somebody establishes that price point. The next person hears that this person is selling for this price point and latches onto it. So it is with the rentals. I totally agree with you, because when you're increasing, in some cases, so there's no general rule, in some cases, a landlord increases the rents by 100%. In that kind of case, I would assume that maybe the guy needs to tear the house apart and do some renovations and do the likes of it, but nothing changes. The guy just believes that according to my economic realities, I need to earn more to latch onto the dollar rate today. Do you understand? So some of it is not realistic, and I will agree with you. I can't even try to defend or add anything to that. So most of it, oftentimes, in this part of this world, is speculative. So you are very correct with that.
The claims it's regulated.
The reality is that that's the way to go.
Sorry?
That the regulation is very important. At the same time, you don't want to over-regulate the market. It's absurd to have inspection fee, caution fee, one kind of fee, and all sorts of fees.
You're not even regulating at all.
As a matter of fact, today, your costs or associated cost of the rents has come up to almost 30% of the actual rental cost of the building. And this is where subnationals, which I'm sure the PAMSEC in Kano and the CPS to the governor, PAMSEC in Kaduna and the CPS to the governor in Kano, I'm sure there are actions from the federal government to say subnationals now need to take on this issue of regulation. You know, to start with, real estate is one of those markets where people have fallen prey, and the element of fraud has increased dramatically because of lack of regulation. So when people just put a board somewhere, you pay, 5 people can pay for the same house, and then they all meet on the same day and argue who owns. So whoever has the fisc off will get the keys, and the remaining 4 will have to go and look for how to deal with it. So regulation is very important. Then the second is the law. You know, you also have a situation where some tenants move in, and then they tell you go to court, and then they enjoy free rent over that period while the case is going through adjudication. So we need to look at it from both sides. I saw someone on your station saying, when you see a free house, just move in. Imagine if you're a landlord who was anticipating rents of this amount and someone had moved into that house while you're waiting. So we have...
He was, just to be clear, he was talking about, I'm sure you are in Abuja now, you know that there are a lot of houses unoccupied for long years. That's the point. No,
I agree with his point. I'm just saying the rents need to be regulated. However, from an investment point of view, you don't want to demarket an environment through regulation, because otherwise the little supply we're even getting will just cease to exist. That's the issue. So what we need to regulate is the practice of the people that are really putting this up for society use or social use. And it comes back to my next
But the House of Assembly, sometime in 2024, the House of Assembly, you know, actually...
National Assembly,
House of Reps,
talked
I was going to say. Yes, talked about it, yes. And there have been, you know, initiatives. Lagos State is doing that. Lagos State has a bill, 2025 bill, you know, which will sort of regulate on both sides, both the tenant and landlord. So why is it not feasible? But please hold on. You respond, Victor.
Because we have to take a break, and of course, when we return too, we should begin taking responses from our viewers. Please stay with us.
This lifestyle of I'm living in so place, I'm living in so place, go to where you can afford.
I agree with you. But the big question, I mean, the last respondent, the big question is, where can you afford decent, comfortable, housing now at this moment, even right here in Abuja? Kayode, please, Kayode, can you quickly, maybe if you may, in 60 seconds, so that we can go around, respond to some of the issues that the respondents, have talked about?
Okay. Interestingly, the one that dropped at me that kept me smiling the most is the last respondent that said, "Go to where you can afford." That resonated with what I said. Then the other person mentioned something about, to be honest, all the people you had, the respondents you had, I think one way or the other we had addressed most of the conversation points. And in terms of regulation, the regulatory part, like Damola was already talking about, is actually a very dicey area, dicey strategy. So regulation is good, but over-regulation might kill. So you need to be able to also be quite careful about how you, because it's not just about even the regulations, it's about the enforcement of the regulations that you have. And I also, the last time, I talked about the part where somebody said, you should go and rent a house that Fashola has built in Lagos, because, trust me, Lagosians also know some of these laws. A tenant is telling you the laws from day one, and the landlord will tell you that, no, I built my house as so whatever it is. If you need to rent a house with these conditions, go and get a government house that can provide this. So that's why it's a very tricky area, because otherwise, verbatim, like what Damola had said, you might overregulate and drive out the investors that are even trying to reduce the housing gap.
Less than 60 seconds, you have gone by. Victor.
All right. Perhaps we should come back to Damola and some of the issues that have been raised. I was making a point while we were off air when Kayode said, "Oh, move to." The last respondent also said that move to where you can afford. That place you think you can afford, you go there today, the rent increases by 100%. You call his bluff, you go elsewhere, you get a breather for like 6 months, they do the same thing to you. So where is the hiding place for the low-income Nigerian?
So I think, and this is a challenge to subnationals and also the federal government, access to land needs to improve. We have $300 billion sitting in debt capital, which is land that you cannot title or create mortgages on. As long as you have that, the supply of houses will be impeded, and that's where the Land Use Act comes in. So we need to find a way to digitize and improve land access so that people can deal.
All right. Let me quickly dash to the permanent secretary in Kaduna. Is the Kaduna State government working on regulation, for instance, just to give succor to the average people, residents, and from Kaduna State?
The government, as most of the discussant and respondent have indicated, it is a common scenario where you see people being subjected to exploitation by either the landlords themselves or through their agents. Now, what the government is doing now is, for instance, you see a house built more than 4 or 5 decades ago. Now, the landlords or their agents are now transferring all the current pressure on the intending or prospective tenants. That is unfair. If a new house is being charged a bit higher rent, you can understand, you can rationalize that because of the rising cost of building materials. But it doesn't make sense to see a house built more than 40, 50 years back, yet being charged exorbitantly. So as a government, we are working with the judicial and other stakeholders to rejig the tenancy law such that the citizens will be protected. But let me quickly add that while government is making frantic efforts to increase the supply of houses, either through the social housing or the mass housing through the PPP, is equally of importance to ensure that what is making the available or current housing being subjected to a lot of pressure that speculators are exploiting is by decongesting the towns and cities. That can be effectively done by opening up the hinterland. You can't expect maybe villagers and some people from the countryside will be migrating on a daily basis because of absence of basic social amenities in those areas. They will be putting pressure on whatever you are, getting in the cities. So as a government, we are trying to, at the same time, while providing the houses in the most urban areas, we are equally opening up the hinterland so that people, especially the villagers, can conveniently live a comfortable life. They may be only coming to the cities when the need arises. That way, we believe the pressure will be drastically reduced and people will be allowed to have a decent accommodation to avoid a situation where you see a house meant for maybe 5 to 6 people currently being overstretched by a kind of people beyond your immediate families because of attaches running to about 14, 15 on a facility meant for 5, 6 people. So as a government, we are conscious of that and making frantic effort to address that. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope as you do that also, you factor in the issue of security, for the houses you're building. We have a number of messages. It's just that some of the issues that have been raised by these messages have also been dealt with. That's why. But I'll just quickly mention some of the names. Nanda Wuye from Jos. You are talking about a strategic approach to reduce construction costs. You say is to use alternative building materials and construction methods where feasible, utilizing recyclable materials, prefabricated components, straw boards, cost-effective finishing materials, and drywall for non-loading bearing walls. You say this can significantly lower expenses while also maintaining quality, and I thought this is a very good suggestion. Thank you. We also have from Mark from Akaifa in Calabar. You are suggesting that government can build what you have termed low-cost houses. I mean, the PAMSEC and the CPS in Kano have already talked about what they are doing. You say government residential area GRA, we find this, federal and state low cost. You say when other civil servants have an affordable place to stay, rent will continue to skyrocket. Those who have muscles themselves to position in government are still the owners of these houses, which already are milking poor Nigerians. The government should continue to build these facilities and naturally crash. Chris Simeon, you also talked about civil servants who cannot afford decent housing after 35 years of service. We have Alexander Sunday from Jos also. You talk about this specifically to Bauchi, Borno, Adamawa, Gombe in Northeast, Kaduna, Katsina, and Kano in Northwest. You said they should continue to build mass housing units for the people to reduce house rent. This one comes with a number of questions. Abdul Ibrahim Iyaji, how do rising building material costs justify rent increases, and where should the line be drawn? I think we've talked about speculative costs and actual costs and all that. The rising cost of house rent in Nigeria is not a major concern. Lafia is no exception. So many messages that have come in, and Mohammed Anwar Afamai from Kano has also sent in his message. I know Victor will quickly go through his own messages, and then we'll come to you, CPS, for your closing thoughts.
All right, thank you. I have quite a number of messages. Like Claire said, we've addressed some of the concerns. One, Akindele is asking from Ibadan what tenants can do in a state where state government increases rent of government properties. All right, and this one from Abdulrazak Abdul Kadri talks about, the problem not being, being shelters for the average citizens. And he said big houses not being occupied, and what government, and they've lost their value, and they want the government to do something about it. Now, this one from Chris Simeon talks about the rising cost of house rent in some parts of the country that has become worrisome. He's urging government at all levels to look at the issue of landlord-tenant agreement and redefine it so that landlords do not take advantage of the desperation of tenants in their times of need. And this one I will read from Dr. Abdul Salam in Ilorin. It says, his name is Dr. Abdul Salam from Ilorin. a lecturer in the university, and sad to tell you that since the past 10 years that I have been trying to build a 3-bedroom flat, even at the low-income urban periphery of my town, yet I have not been able to achieve this objective. However, I observed that during my PhD study in Malaysia, the central government of Malaysia declared an emergency in housing development to the extent that most of us PhD students were able to rent some of these low-income buildings of the country, Malaysia. So why can't the federal government of Nigeria do the same and mandate each state government to allocate at least 5% of their budgetary allocations to mass housing developments, at least for registered and verifiable civil servants in their states?
That is Abdul Razak.
Yes. Sir Abdul Salam, okay. Dr. Abdul Salam from Ilorin. And I think the others we have addressed. I acknowledge the message from Dan Machugoro, who says, God bless Nigeria.
All right, quickly, okay, in addition to what Abdul Salam, asked, I want to ask the CPS, what is the critical role of the Land Use Act, which is almost 50 years, and I think it's about 48 years, since in 1978. How does that tie to, high rent, and how can we address that quickly?
Is something that to be considered as well, looking at the Land Act. And then the issue of regulation is very important, but sometimes it's a dilemma that you cannot fully put so much stringent on regulations, because you may probably drive away investors away from investing. That will add more deficit of houses. So you have to look inward and see what you do. Looking at the increase of the prices of the building materials as well. So all these kind of things, the government has to look inward to find solutions to that, which the kind of state government is doing that. But what we are interested now, especially looking at the Land Act, is to provide more houses, more supply of houses from the part of the government, from the part of the partnerships with the private sectors, and also encouraging more investors to come in. So we are more interested in that. When you get more supplies of houses, definitely the rent will go down. And if there is need for fuller regulations, then the government definitely will do that. But I know that the government is very, very interested in finding the very affordable prices, houses to the people of Kano State. So regulation is good, but it's a dilemma that you have to take it with very careful measures before you implement it.
Thank you. Damola, I think I'm giving you the last, we're giving you, the opportunity to have your last say. What do you think about the Land Use Act? Sometimes, even getting a land to build, it's like walking through the walls of a labyrinth. So along the way, you get frustrated, you get tired, and then you abandon the process.
Thank you. I think government just needs to find a way to improve the process, digitize the process, and make it available for citizens to be able to acquire and develop on them. But how does this affect rentals? I think we need to look at what are the key factors that contribute to this rental situation. One, government needs to step in. We need to engage with stakeholders like the NBA. Let's standardize tenancy agreements, so that it makes it easier to advocate in courts. I don't think we should be paying 10, 20% on a yearly basis for the same agreements. I'm not trying to belittle the efforts that lawyers put into it.
For first time
yes, for first time tenants, let's standardize it. And then the renewals, we should put some measures to, cap them so that they are not just extended in nature. And same thing for the agency fees, and then all the other fees that come behind rents, like caution fees. The government needs to step in to say landlords needs to stop, we understand tenants leave the houses in a very bad shape, which is where the insurance industry can come in.
Not all tenants.
Not all tenants, actually. But in some cases, when you leave a house, the house is badly, used. And so that's where the insurance entities can come in and deal with such issues. But let's start with even standardizing the tenancy agreements. Let's start with regulating how much an agent can earn from a house. Should we pay visitation fees for looking for houses?
But it will be difficult to standardize this because the Act, invests the power the rights to own on state government.
Yes, the state
Yes,
government
so-
can adopt templates like the law. The law can be standardized. The tenancy agreements, 2-page, 3-page, this is how it should look in Kano, this is how it should look in Kaduna, this is how it should look in Lagos. So once you standardize that, you give the tenants a breather. The reason why lawyers find it difficult to adjudicate matters in court, because you have all sorts of clauses that have been put into those agreements that make litigation impossible to engage with. So I think all stakeholders need to come to the table, and we need to look at regulation from the point of standardizing fees rather than regulating supply.
All right. Damola Akindolire, lead consultant, Renewed Hope Cities program. We thank you very much for your time and your contributions to Good Morning Nigeria today.
Thank you for having me.
Let me also thank Shehu Usman Salihu, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Housing and Urban Development in Kaduna State. Many thanks for your time on the program. We'd also like to extend our gratitude to Mustafa Muhammad, who is the Chief Press Secretary to the Kano State Governor. We thank you for your time and your thoughts. And finally, but by no means the least, Olukayode Olusoya, who's joined us for the second time today, CEO of the Oak Holdings.
And there'll be a third time.
We'll take you up on your offer
Yes.
to provide housing for civil servants. Kayode, thank you very much. You joined us via Zoom from Lagos.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's Good Morning Nigeria for today. I thank you very much. And I want to thank everyone who sent in their messages and, of course, the respondents who aired their views. I am Claire Adelabu Abdul Razak, and I'm signing out for this week. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
And I'm Victor as well. I'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.